Thank you, everybody, for coming to the Aaron Torres Podcast YouTube page. I do have one quick favor before we get to the video that you came here for, and that is very simply this. You see that little red subscribe button below this video? Go ahead, smash that subscribe button. It really does help me. It really does help this channel grow and my audience grow. So go ahead and hit that red subscribe button. And now, here is the video that you came here for. I do want to stick with college football, though, because there's a few reasons why. One, as I said to lead the show, we're now like 3 weeks away from SEC Media Days, people. It is coming. It is almost here. And once Media Days hits, it is full speed ahead. But I'm not just talking college football for the sake of it. There's actually a very interesting story going on with one first-year head coach that I've really never seen before. College football fans, I just said it before the break, you guys and girls are crazy. And I include, whatever. I love college football. Fans are crazy. And I have seen fans flip on coaches pretty quick. I don't know that I've ever seen fans flip on a coach before he has ever coached a game, only that's exactly what's happening with one head coach, so let's get into it. Obviously, we're coming off a historic coaching carousel last November, December, and January. But what I would say about all of the changes, which we've talked about on this show nonstop really since these jobs started opening last September, October with USC and LSU, for the most part, I think most of the hires have actually worked out pretty well. And not only worked out pretty well, but the new coaches have really given their fans a reason for excitement early on. Marcus Freeman, Notre Dame. We just talked about Notre Dame's going to have a pretty tough schedule this year. I think it's going to be hard to maintain that 11-12 win regular season kind of situation that Brian Kelly has put them in. But Marcus Freeman right now has the number one recruiting class in the country in 2023. Incoming high school seniors. Notre Dame fans have a lot of reason to be excited with Marcus Freeman. USC fans. Lincoln Riley's track record speaks for itself, as does his early recruiting. Hits the portal, brings in Caleb Williams, brings in Jordan Addison, has a jump start to 2023 where he has the number 2 quarterback committed. So these are two guys that just got hired that are giving their fans plenty of reason for excitement. I actually thought Brian Kelly did a pretty good job in the portal once he got to LSU. Brent Venables, I thought he did a great job putting his staff together and bringing in players like Dylan Gabriel at Oklahoma. But there is one head coach that, as I just said a minute ago, has his fan base very frustrated. It is Florida head coach Billy Napier coming off a weird couple weeks where he's lost some recruits. He's lost some players to the portal. He had to send an open letter to the fan base. And as I just said, it feels like Florida fans have already turned on him, or at least a very small vocal minority. Let's get into it, but before we do, let me just say this. Florida fans, calm down, take a deep breath. It's all going to be okay. And so let's get into it, and let's start with Billy Napier, the guy, because one thing I will say is when he was hired, it was like universally, this is an awesome hire, good for Florida, go Gators, Gator Chomp, right? I mean, you go back to November and December, Billy Napier was the hot Group of 5 coach that everybody wanted. Coached at Louisiana Lafayette. Don't call them Louisiana Lafayette. They prefer to just be called Louisiana. But he was absolutely fantastic at that school. Starts out 7-7 in his first year. His final 3 years goes 11-3, 10-1 during the COVID season, including winning at Iowa State, which was a preseason top 15 team. And then last year goes 12-1. The only loss was on opening day to Texas at Texas. So we're talking about 12 straight wins to end the regular season. He has a track record as an assistant coach working under Nick Saban, working under Dabo Swinney. Everybody universally agreed. This guy is overdue for a Power 5 job. He is a guy that actually has turned down quite a few Power 5 jobs. I don't know if he was officially offered Auburn, but he got pretty far in the process and said, I'm going to pump the brakes. I'm not interested. Got pretty far with South Carolina, said, I'm good. This isn't the one. So when he chose Florida, it felt like, okay, he's been waiting. This is the one. It is a match made in heaven. And it's funny because, remember, he was coaching at Louisiana Lafayette. There were a lot of LSU fans that were like, I would have rather had that guy than going to get Brian Kelly. So I bring it up to say this guy was universally respected, universally loved. But it really hasn't been a good 6 months since he took over the job. First of all, the class of 2022, most of it is not his fault. Obviously, most of that class was recruited and either committed or decommitted under Dan Mullen, but it finishes 17th overall in the national rankings. Not a deal breaker, but it did finish behind Kentucky, It did finish behind Missouri, a bunch of programs that Florida historically cannot finish behind in recruiting if they want to compete at the highest levels. They finished with the 17th ranked recruiting class in 2022. Not really blaming Billy Napier, but it's something. Then the last couple weeks, it's been really weird. First of all, he cut a couple players from the team, essentially cut them. There is a rule according to the NCAA that a first-year head coach, players that he doesn't want to keep in the program, you can essentially do exactly what I just said. You can cut them. You can say, we'll keep you on scholarship. The only rule is essentially you can get rid of them from the team, but you are obligated to keep them on campus. Essentially, if you don't want a player in your program, you can cut him for the third time. I know I just said it. You can cut him, but you have to keep him on scholarship if he wants to stay on scholarship. Obviously, hits the portal. But last week, Billy Napier cut 2-3 guys that were believed to be players that were expected to be impact players next coming season. They're gone. A former 5-star transfer named DeMarcus Bowman, 5-star high school player, commits to Clemson, goes to Florida. He enters the portal. Billy Napier feels the need to send an open letter to the fan base, which freaked everybody out. And then Sunday was when it really fell apart. For people who don't follow high school football recruiting, and I'm not claiming to be an expert, but Florida was a finalist for a high 4-star, low 5-star, basically the best available quarterback in the 2023 Classic. He's from California, was long believed to be a Florida lean, was set to commit last week, decides to push back the commitment, decides to visit Miami, ends up committing to Miami on Sunday. So you lose him. You have the DeMarcus Bowman situation. You have the open letter. You cut 3 players. The last recruiting class wasn't good. I should mention there's a 5-star corner named A.J. Harris that was also believed to be a Florida lean. He ends up committing to Georgia earlier this week. And so it's just been one thing after the other with Billy Napier. It led to the open letter. It led to Florida fans' frustration. But as I said, let me be the voice of reason. Let me calm down. I still believe in this guy. And while I understand the concern of Florida fans, I do believe you got to pump the brakes, give this guy time, see what he's all about. Couple reasons why. First of all, I'll say this. I know the recruiting hasn't been off to an incredible start, but a couple things. One, he's done pretty well in the portal overall. Just got Ricky Pearsall, a wide receiver from Arizona State. He was Arizona State's leading receiver last year. Really talented player. I think he's going to have an instant impact in the SEC. Got Jack Miller as a backup quarterback. Really talented. Played at Ohio State. And did get some wins on signing day last year as the head coach of the Florida Gators, including Kamari Wilson, a 5-star safety from the state of Florida. Played at IMG Academy. Was believed to, I believe it was Georgia that he was maybe going to, instead ends up at Florida. So it's not as though the guy can't recruit at all. The other thing I would say, don't ever let the first recruiting class, which is far from being done, by the way, determine how you feel as a head coach. And I think getting off to a fast start is important, right? It's not a be-all, end-all, though. Tom Herman had a top 5 class his first year as the head coach at Texas, his first full cycle after he got hired. How'd that work out for him? Clay Helton had a top 10 class when he was hired. First full year as the head coach. How'd that work out for him? So it's not as though, one, that he can't recruit at all. He's already gotten some big recruiting wins. And it's not as though other coaches that have had early success, it doesn't mean that it's a be-all, end-all to immediate success. It certainly helps. You need good players. It's about the Jimmies and the Joes, not the X's and the O's. But that's not all. The other thing that I would consider, a few other things as a matter of fact. One, Billy Napier has had some very interesting comments about NIL over the last couple weeks, and I'm not going to spend too much time talking about them, but it appears as though maybe he is not competing on a level playing field with some other schools. You know my policy on NIL. Because we don't know exactly what's going on, I don't accuse other schools of doing other things unless it's super egregious like Louisville the other day. But you lose a 5-star quarterback to Miami after what John Ruiz did with the basketball player Nigel Pack. I think we all kind of have our suspicions as to what's going on, especially because Billy Napier said, hey, we're a little behind the 8 ball. In the open letter, he said, we have a chance to do something special at Florida with our alumni base in the NIL space. Let's get that thing going. So I think that's a factor as well. I also think it should be mentioned. It's a factor that the program that he inherited under Dan Mullen was kind of a mess, right? Yeah, I know Dan Mullen had success on the field, but I think we also understand early in his time, Dan Mullen had success on the field. But I think what we also realized with Dan Mullen is that it completely fell apart really quick. First couple years, 10-3, 11-2. The COVID year, 8-4. But as we all remember, he lost the last 3 games of that season. Won the LSU game when Marco Wilson threw a shoe. He loses the SEC championship game, and then he gets smoked in the Cotton Bowl and starts making excuses. Well, this doesn't even matter. We're looking ahead to 2021. Well, just one problem. 2021 was a disaster for Dan Mullen too. Goes 5-6 before he's fired. Loses to Missouri. Loses to Kentucky. Loses to South Carolina. The discipline is a mess. That is what Billy Napier inherited, and it is going to take time to clean things up. Now, I understand that this is 2022. I understand we live in the portal world. I understand that there's no 5-year plans in the SEC. But the final point on Billy Napier I would make is this. The day he was hired, everybody universally loved the hire, and you have to trust that this guy that everybody loved 4 or 5 months ago is the guy that you got. The one thing that Billy Napier is known for is structure, discipline, accountability. I know that's not one thing, but they're all kind of the same thing. Structure, accountability, discipline, and infrastructure that's in place. I mean, the stories on Billy Napier, his organization, attention to detail are legendary. Legendary, okay? First of all, there's stories about how everything down to when he got to Florida, that he changed everything from meals, weightlifting, this, that, to where the players can park. That's how detail-oriented he is. He's got one of the biggest coaching staffs in college football, and at the not the FCS level, the Group of 5 level at Louisiana, he had this incredibly big staff. People would come in, and they'd be blown away by not only how many people he had working under him, but how every person knew their responsibility on a day-to-day, minute-to-minute, moment-to-moment basis. And so this is all long-winded, but it's my way of saying you brought him in for the structure. You brought him in for the discipline. You brought him in because he's not going to cut any corners. So now that he's not cutting any corners, you can't be mad. I know you lost a 4 to 5-star recruit on Sunday. I understand the frustration. But if you believe this guy was the guy 6 months ago, and you believed he needed to clean up the program, well, this is what happens. 1, you win and lose some in recruiting. And 2, and this is very important, not only do you win and lose some in recruiting, but when you come in as a new head coach, sometimes the first thing you got to do is get rid of some of the people that were in the program. So I'm not saying you shouldn't be worried, Florida fans. And I'm not saying it's going to be easy for Billy Napier in year 1 either. We just talked about the toughest schedules or the biggest week 1 games. Florida with Utah is right there. And then it doesn't get any easier from there with cross-divisional games against LSU at home, Texas A&M at home, or Texas A&M on the road. You got Georgia on a neutral field. You play at Tennessee. You got Florida State at the end of the year. You got Utah, as I just said, at the beginning of the year. So, listen, if this year ends at 4-8, plus Billy Napier didn't recruit well, that's one thing. But how about we give him till at least September? Florida fans, I understand your frustration. I'm not trying to belittle how some of you feel, but you hired this guy because of discipline, accountability, and all sorts of stuff like that. You got to give him time to implement his program.